Imagine this. You're sitting at home, watching a professional basketball game. One of the biggest stars in the sport is on the floor. A fist comes crashing down onto her throat. Her head jolts. She grabs her neck. And every single referee on that court? They just keep walking. No whistle. No call. Nothing. The game moves on like nothing happened. And the woman who just got punched in the throat? She finishes the game, then walks off the court early with a back injury, leaving millions of viewers asking the same exact question. Did the referees actually just ignore that? That clip went everywhere. Social media exploded. Millions of people watched it in slow motion, over and over, watching the moment a fist connected with Caitlin Clark's throat while the officials stood just feet away and did absolutely nothing. And then, almost like it was a normal Tuesday, the league office woke up the next morning and suspended the player who threw the punch. After the fact. After the game was over. After the damage was done. But here's what makes this story so much bigger than just one punch, one game, or one bad call. Because what happened on June 24th, 2026, didn't fall out of the sky. It didn't just randomly happen. It was the latest chapter in a story that has been building for over 2 years now. A story that started the moment Caitlin Clark walked into the WNBA and changed everything. And at the center of all of it, a question that nobody in the league seems to want to answer directly. Why does it keep happening? And why do the referees keep looking the other way? Let's go back to the very beginning. Because to understand what's happening right now, you have to understand where all of this started. It was the spring of 2024. Caitlin Clark had just finished one of the greatest college basketball careers in the history of the sport. She broke the all-time NCAA scoring record. She carried Iowa to back-to-back national championship games. She became the #1 overall pick in the WNBA draft. And when she arrived in Indiana to play for the Fever, something happened that nobody had ever quite seen before in women's basketball. The fans came. Millions of them. Arenas that used to sit half empty were suddenly selling out. Teams that had been playing in smaller buildings had to move their home games into bigger NBA arenas just to hold the crowds that showed up to watch her play. Television ratings that had barely moved in years suddenly tripled, then quadrupled. Her games averaged around 1.2 million viewers. That's roughly 200% more than games she wasn't playing in. One finance professor at Indiana University actually sat down and calculated what Caitlin Clark was worth to the league. His number? She accounted for more than 26% of all WNBA economic activity in her first season. One player. More than a quarter of everything. And that was just in year one. The WNBA had also been quietly working on a new television deal. They had been making somewhere around $50 million a year from their previous deal. Then Caitlin Clark arrived. And that deal became an 11-year, $2.2 billion contract. More than triple what it had been before. This is not a small thing. This is the league's entire future, built significantly on the back of one player's arrival. So you would think the league would do everything in its power to protect her. To make sure she was safe. To make sure the product they were now selling to networks and fans was something worth watching. Instead, what happened was something that thousands of people are still trying to wrap their heads around. 10 games into her WNBA career, Caitlin Clark got hip-checked. Not during a play. Not while she had the ball. Not as part of a defensive contest. She was standing on the sideline, completely away from the ball, after the whistle had already blown, and a Chicago Sky player named Chindy Carter just walked up to her and delivered a hard shoulder and hip check that sent Clark crashing to the floor. The officials saw it. They called it. But they called it a common foul. A regular foul. The kind of foul you'd call if someone reached in for the ball. Not a flagrant. Not anything unusual. Just a foul. The crowd reacted. Fans at home reacted. The clip spread across social media within hours. Millions of people watched it and said the same thing. That wasn't a basketball play. That was something else. The next day, the WNBA reviewed the play. They upgraded it to a flagrant 1 foul. But here's the thing. No fine. No suspension. Chindy Carter walked away from that incident without missing a single game. And Caitlin Clark walked away from it knowing that in her 10th professional game, someone had physically attacked her on the court while the referees just watched and called it a regular foul. Now, some people pushed back on that framing. They said it was basketball. Physical play happens. Rookies get tested. That's part of the game. And there's truth in that. Basketball is physical. Every player takes hard fouls. Every rookie faces some version of being pushed around to see how they respond. But here's what makes Clark's situation different from regular basketball physicality. And it's a number. Since the moment Caitlin Clark entered the WNBA, she's been on the receiving end of 9 flagrant fouls.
9.
In 72 games. That's the most of any player in that same time period. 1 flagrant foul roughly every 8 games. And here's the part that really makes people's heads spin. The most severe of those fouls, the ones that were eventually ruled to be worthy of ejection, the flagrant 2-level fouls, they were never called in real time. Not once. Every single time Clark has been hit hard enough to warrant an automatic ejection, the referees on the court have let it go. They've looked at it or they haven't looked at it, and they've moved on. It's only after the game, after the video spreads, after the public pressure starts building, that the league does anything. That pattern, that specific sequence of events, is at the heart of everything we're talking about today. And it played out again in the summer of 2025, when Marina Mabrey shoved Clark to the ground during a game. Clark hit the floor hard. Mabrey received a technical foul, not a flagrant, not an ejection. Just a technical. After review, the league upgraded it. Mabrey eventually admitted the act was wrong. But again, in the moment, the referees let it go. Each time this happens, the conversation restarts. Each time, the league does something after the fact. Each time, people wonder if anything will actually change. Then came June of 2026, and the week that finally broke through the noise in a way that even casual sports fans couldn't ignore. It started on a Monday, June 22nd. The Indiana Fever were hosting the Phoenix Mercury. These two teams had been building towards something. They'd played physical basketball against each other already, and there was a tension in the air that anyone watching could feel. The game was chippy from the start. Lots of contact. Lots of back and forth. Lots of moments where players were right on that edge. And then it happened. Fourth quarter, the Fever up by 19. There's a collision. Clark gets called for a personal foul on Phoenix's DeWanna Bonner. A bunch of players start gathering. It's one of those moments in basketball where the emotions are running high and everyone's kind of in each other's face. Nothing crazy, just that competitive energy that spills over sometimes. And Caitlin Clark, as she's walking away from the situation, starts clapping. Just clapping. The way competitive people do when they're fired up and feeling the game, and the emotion of the moment is just coming out of them. And referee Gerda Gatling blew the whistle. Technical foul. On Clark. For clapping. The crowd couldn't believe it. Clark couldn't believe it. She walked straight to Gatling and asked, right there on the court, why she'd just received a technical foul. Gatling's explanation? She was clapping and instigating. After the game, Clark didn't hold back. She stood at the podium and said what she was thinking with complete clarity. It's ridiculous. I got a technical for clapping. And then she said something that cut right to the bone of the whole situation. She said, we should all just go on the calendar now and pick a game I'm going to be suspended for because if they're giving me technicals for clapping, a suspension is coming. 8 technical fouls in the WNBA gets you an automatic 1-game suspension. Clark now had 5. And she called out Gatling by name. She said, Gerda said, I got a technical for clapping. I told her, then you just don't like competitive basketball. And that's just facts. The Fever appealed the technical. The league reviewed it. And on Thursday, June 25th, they confirmed. The technical stands. It will not be rescinded. So now we have a situation where a player gets punched in the throat and no foul is called in the moment, but a player clapping during a heated competition gets a technical foul that sticks after review. These two things happened in the same week. Let that sit for a second. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Because between that Monday game and Thursday's announcement, there was a Wednesday, June 24th, 2026. Game 2 between the Fever and the Mercury. If the Monday game was tense, the Wednesday game was a full pressure cooker. The kind of game where every possession matters, where every player is competing at the absolute edge of their intensity. A back and forth battle between two good teams that came right down to the wire. The Mercury won it 111-109. But the final score wasn't what anyone was talking about when they woke up the next morning. It happened in the second quarter. Caitlin Clark was bringing the ball up past half court. She lost it. The ball was loose. Clark went down to the floor. And then, in the scramble for the ball, Phoenix Mercury forward Alyssa Thomas came crashing through the scrum. What happened next is the kind of thing that makes you want to rewind it several times to make sure you're seeing it correctly. Thomas's closed fist made contact with Clark's throat. Not her shoulder. Not her arm. Her throat. Clark's head snapped.
She grabbed her neck.
Thomas got up, and the game kept going. No whistle. No foul. Nothing. The referees just kept the game moving. Like it hadn't happened. Like Caitlin Clark's throat hadn't just absorbed a closed fist while she was lying on the floor. Clark played through it. She played through the rest of the first half and into the third quarter, finishing with 19 points and 8 assists. But then she came off the floor in the second half with a back injury and didn't return. After the game, Indiana Fever head coach Stephanie White walked into the press conference and didn't waste any time. She was direct. She was clear, and she was visibly frustrated in a way that felt like someone who had been holding it together for a long time and finally had enough. She called them cheap shots. 2 of them. 2 cheap shots that weren't called. She said she had a generational talent and a WNBA superstar on her team who took 2 cheap shots in that game, and neither one was called. She called it absolutely unacceptable. And then she said something important. She reminded everyone that the league had spent the entire offseason creating a special task force focused specifically on improving officiating. She had been part of that process. And she said, the one thing we keep asking for is consistency. Clark is not called the same way as everybody else is called. The fist in the throat, White said, is crazy. It's crazy. It's dangerous. Fans watching on television that night began spreading the video almost immediately. Social media did what social media does. The clip slowed down, zoomed in, shared millions of times. People analyzing it frame by frame. And the more people looked at it, the worse it looked. The next day, Thursday, the WNBA League office issued a statement. They announced that Alyssa Thomas had been given a flagrant foul 2 penalty and a 1-game suspension for, and this is their exact language, recklessly making contact with her fist to the throat area of Indiana Fever guard Caitlin Clark. Thomas would serve that suspension on Saturday. But here's the question that lit up sports debates everywhere. Why did it take a review? Why wasn't it called in the game? The officials were right there. The play happened directly in front of them. A closed fist hit a player in the throat. That's one of the most basic, fundamental things a referee in any sport is supposed to catch and call. The WNBA's own ruling confirmed it was a non-basketball act. A flagrant 2. Something serious enough to warrant both a penalty and a suspension. And yet the 3 referees who were on that court, positioned around the play, didn't blow their whistles. Now, the Phoenix Mercury organization had some thoughts about the suspension. Head coach Nate Tibbetts came to his press conference on Saturday with a lot of energy. He opened by saying the organization fully supported Alyssa Thomas. He questioned the suspension process. He said he was part of the referee task force himself and that the league was relying on, in his words, social media screenshots. And then he said something that got a lot of attention. He suggested the suspension was driven by fan pressure. He implied that the league was reacting to the noise rather than the facts. And he took a shot at the people defending Clark online, saying the league shouldn't base its calls on things like generational talent or fan base involvement. And then he added, white players or black players. That line landed like a grenade, because it introduced race directly into a conversation that had been, at least on the surface, about officiating. And suddenly the story got even bigger and more complicated. Because the reality of Caitlin Clark's arrival in the WNBA has always been tangled up in difficult, uncomfortable questions about race, visibility, and who gets celebrated in women's sports. Clark is a white player who became the biggest star in a league that is predominantly black. Her rise brought an enormous new audience to the sport, an audience that hadn't been paying attention before. And some of those new fans brought with them assumptions, hostilities, and grievances that had nothing to do with basketball. Some people argued that the aggression toward Clark was racially motivated, that black players resented her outsized fame and attention. Others pushed back hard on that framing, arguing that it was being used to dismiss legitimate conversations about the struggles of black women athletes and the historical lack of attention they'd received. The whole thing became a culture war that was about far more than basketball. And right in the middle of all of it were the referees, caught between fan bases that couldn't agree on what they were even watching. But here's what a really thoughtful analysis from Sirat Sohi, who covers the WNBA for The Ringer, brought to the conversation. She said something that kind of cuts through the noise and gets to what the actual core problem is. She said Caitlin Clark is a magnifying glass, not the cause of the problems, not the victim of some coordinated campaign, not the star who gets too much attention. A magnifying glass, meaning the problems were already there. The bad officiating, the inconsistency, the league's reactive rather than proactive approach to crises. Those problems existed before Clark. Other players had been dealing with poor officiating for years. The difference is that now, with the entire sports world watching every Clark game, those problems are being seen by millions of people who had no idea they existed. Sohi said the WNBA is very reactionary. They don't set a standard for how they want the game to look and then enforce it consistently. Instead, they respond to pressure. The Thomas suspension came after the video spread, and the public outcry became too loud to ignore. The Carter flagrant upgrade came after the video spread. The pattern, Sohi said, is exactly the same every single time. And that's not a Caitlin Clark problem. That's a leadership problem. Meanwhile, Clark herself was out indefinitely with that back injury. She would miss the Fever's game on Saturday. And her teammate Sophie Cunningham wasn't going to let the week go by without having her say. Cunningham sat down for her podcast and explained that during the actual game, nobody on the Fever saw the Thomas incident in real time. It happened in a scramble. Everyone was focused on different parts of the play. She said, "I promise you, if we had seen it happen, we would have had her back." And then she turned the heat up. She said this type of thing happens every single game to Clark. And the league and the refs do absolutely nothing about it. Every single game. She said Thomas kneed Clark in the groin and hit her in the throat with a closed fist. And if any Fever player had done that to a Mercury player, the outrage would have been enormous. But they're definitely targeting Clark, Cunningham said. And the league and the refs do nothing to protect her. That's Clark's own teammate. Someone who plays alongside her every game, who sees the physical contact up close, who practices with her, and knows what she goes through. Saying they're definitely targeting her and the refs do nothing. Now those are strong words. And some people will push back on the word targeting. Because targeting implies intent, and intent is hard to prove. What CBS Sports did was actually look at the data. And what the data shows is interesting regardless of what you believe about intent. Since Caitlin Clark entered the WNBA in 2024, she has received more flagrant fouls than any other player. And every single time she's been hit hard enough to warrant an immediate ejection, the referees on the court didn't make that call. All of the flagrant 2-level contact she's received has only been properly penalized after the fact, when the league reviewed it after the game. Compare that to every other flagrant 2 in the league during that same period. 5 other flagrant 2 fouls were called since Clark's debut. All 5 of the others were called right there in real time during the game, leading to immediate ejections. Just like the rules say they should be. Only Clark's worst fouls got missed in the moment. Every single time. Is that a conspiracy? Is it bias? Is it incompetence? Is it a combination of things that's hard to untangle? Different people will have different answers. But the pattern is real. The numbers are real. And the frustration from Clark's teammates, her coach, and fans across the country is completely understandable given that pattern. Let's also talk about what the league was doing while all this was happening. Because this isn't like the WNBA was blindly ignoring its officiating problems. They actually created a formal task force in the off-season specifically to address them. Sue Bloch, the WNBA's head of referee performance and development, spoke to reporters before the season about the changes. She said the officials had received new education. There was a special emphasis on freedom of movement, which means protecting players from unnecessary physical contact. In May, With foul calls actually ticking upward slightly, WNBA leadership said they were pleased with the early progress. But pleased doesn't mean fixed. And the events of the week of June 22nd proved that whatever improvements were being made weren't yet solving the fundamental problem. Bloch also explained the league's philosophy on technical fouls. She said players generally know what's permissible. The league never wants to, as she put it, adjudicate passion out of the game. But overreactions to calls, clapping at officials, waving them off, those things fall into the unsportsmanlike conduct category. Clapping at officials. That's the category they put clapping in. So when Clark clapped while walking away from a confrontation, that was clapping at officials, according to the WNBA. And that's worth a technical foul. But a fist to the throat? That requires an overnight review. There's a senator, a congressman, who actually weighed in publicly on the Clark situation. He said she was being abused and called on the league to do better. Politicians getting involved in a WNBA officiating controversy tells you something about how far this thing has traveled beyond the world of basketball. Clark herself, even while dealing with all of this, continued to play at an extraordinary level. She was putting up 21 points and 8 assists a game this season. She had just set a WNBA record for the longest streak of games with at least 20 points and 5 assists in league history. 6 straight games. A record that had never been done before. She was doing all of this while also accumulating technical fouls at a pace that has her 3 away from an automatic suspension. She's been fined $200 for a tweet about referees. She's been in public confrontations with officials that have played out on national television. And through all of it, her response has been remarkably consistent. She plays with emotion. She plays with passion. She isn't going to change that. But she also clearly believes she's being treated differently, and her actions on the court, the arguments, the confrontations, the technical fouls, reflect someone who is genuinely frustrated and has been for a long time. This is a player who said during her rookie season in 2024, "I think at this point I know I'm going to take a couple of hard shots a game." And that's what it is. A rookie, in her first professional season, had already accepted that she was going to get hit. Hard. Regularly. And that the fouls probably weren't going to be called. That's not a mindset someone develops randomly. That's a mindset that gets built through experience. Now, let's talk about something that's easy to miss in all the heat of this controversy. Because the league's problem isn't unique to Caitlin Clark in every sense. The officiating issues the WNBA has are broader than any one player's experience. Nafisa Collier of the Minnesota Lynx, one of the best players in the league and a fellow star who's had her own conversations about the physical nature of play, spoke about this before the 2026 season. She said today's WNBA is as physical as the NBA was in the 1980s. Those were the days of players like Charles Oakley and Rick Mahorn, guys who were known for physical, bruising, sometimes borderline dangerous basketball. She said the rules needed to change to make the game safer. Gino Arima, the legendary UConn women's basketball coach who has more championships than anyone in the sport's history and who is doing a broadcast appearance ahead of an upcoming WNBA game, said something that cut deep. He said everyone has to keep working really hard to make sure the product is really, really, really good, and it has to continue to get better. Said carefully. But the message between the lines was clear. Right now, the product has problems. And here's the thing that really matters about all of this in the larger picture. The WNBA, in 2026, is at a critical moment in its history. The league just celebrated its 30th anniversary. It has a massive new television deal. It has expansion teams. It has more attention than ever before in its existence. There are more fans watching, more people talking about it, more money flowing in than at any other point in the league's 3-decade run. And all of that is fragile. Because the new audience, the millions of people who came to the WNBA specifically because of Caitlin Clark, they are watching everything. They're watching the basketball. But they're also watching how the league handles moments like the Alyssa Thomas suspension. They're watching whether the referees protect the players. They're watching whether the rules are applied consistently. And when they see a fist hit a player in the throat with no call, and then watch that player clap and get a technical, they form opinions. And those opinions can be very hard to change. The fact that this all got so big, so fast on social media, tells you exactly where things stand. The Mercury's official social media account actually posted a tweet mocking Clark after the incident. It was quickly deleted, but people had already seen it and screenshotted it. It just added more fuel to a fire that was already burning out of control. Now, where does all of this go from here? Alyssa Thomas served her one-game suspension. She missed the Mercury's game on Saturday, June 27th, against the Toronto Tempo. Phoenix lost that game. Caitlin Clark was listed out indefinitely with the back injury she suffered during the Wednesday game. She missed Saturday's game against the Sparks. Her status going forward is uncertain. The technical foul from Monday's game was confirmed to stand. Clark has 5. She needs 3 more before she gets an automatic suspension. And the Fever still have 26 regular season games left to play. The officiating conversation has not gone away. It's actually gotten louder. Every analyst, every sports media personality, every fan with an opinion has been weighing in. Most of them agree on at least one thing. Something needs to change. The deeper question, the one that doesn't have an easy answer, is what exactly needs to change? Is it the referees themselves? Is it the training? Is it the league's leadership? Is it the culture around the game? Is it all of the above? The WNBA's task force was supposed to be the answer. A formal, organized effort to fix officiating. But a task force is only as good as the changes it actually produces. And right now, fans who watched Thomas's fist land on Clark's throat without a whistle being blown have a lot of doubts about whether the task force is producing real results. Phoenix coach Tibbetts is actually on that task force. And he was at a podium 3 days after the incident, defending Thomas and implying the suspension was driven by social media pressure rather than the actual play. Whatever happens inside that task force, it apparently hasn't produced consensus about what the standard should be. And that's exactly what Stephanie White and every person calling for change has been asking for.
Consistency.
A clear standard. Applied the same way every time to every player. It shouldn't be that hard to say. If a player makes contact with their closed fist to another player's throat during a loose ball scramble, that is a foul that needs to be called right there on the court. Not the next day after the video goes viral. Right then. In the moment. That's not about Caitlin Clark specifically. That's about the safety of every player in the league. If it's okay to hit someone in the throat because the refs didn't call it, then it becomes a message to every player. You can get away with that. And in a physical game with athletes who are competing at the highest level, that message has consequences. There are some bigger picture questions that have come up in all of this that are worth sitting with for a moment because they don't have clean answers. Is Caitlin Clark held to a different standard by referees? The technical foul data makes a case that something is different about how she's officiated. She gets called for things that don't result in calls against others. She gets hit in ways that don't result in calls that would result in calls against others. Whether that's bias, whether it's her high profile drawing more scrutiny, whether it's officials who are responding to the culture war around her in ways they aren't even fully aware of, nobody knows for sure. Is the physicality directed at her racially motivated? This is a question people have strong opinions about and limited hard evidence for. What we know is that players from various backgrounds have delivered the hits. Some have commented on the racial dynamics. Some have pushed back on the idea that race is driving it. The honest answer is that race is present in the story whether it's directly causal or not, because race is present in American sports and in American culture, and pretending it isn't there doesn't help anyone. Is the WNBA's leadership capable of fixing these problems? Sirat Sohi used a phrase that's become something of a rallying cry among people frustrated with the league's handling of these crises. She said this is a rocket ship with a bad captain. Meaning, the league has tremendous momentum, incredible talent, a generational star, record revenue. All of that should be driving it to an incredible future. But the decisions being made at the top, the reactive approach, the lack of consistent standards, the handling of controversies like this one, are putting unnecessary risk on everything the league has built. The 30th anniversary of the WNBA was supposed to be a celebration. And it is a legitimate celebration. The league has survived and grown when many people doubted it would. It has nurtured extraordinary athletes for 3 decades. It has been a pioneering organization for women in professional sports. But birthdays are also moments to be honest about where you are and where you need to go. And where the WNBA needs to go on officiating is somewhere very different from where it is right now. Here's the part of this story that doesn't get talked about enough. Caitlin Clark is not going anywhere. She's 24 years old. She just set a WNBA record. She's averaging over 20 points a game while coming off an injury-shortened 2025 season. She is at the beginning, not the middle or end, of what she's going to do in this league. Whatever revenue and attention she generated in 2024, the expectation is that it only grows from here. The question is whether the league can figure out how to handle the weight of what she's brought to it. Because right now, the WNBA is simultaneously the best it has ever been in terms of talent, visibility, and opportunity, and also struggling with a crisis of credibility around whether it can protect its own players and apply its own rules consistently. That's not a contradiction that can be sustained forever. Something has to give. Either the officiating gets genuinely better, consistently, in ways that fans and players and coaches can actually see and trust, or the frustration keeps building. And frustrated fans, especially new fans who came in specifically because of one player, don't always stay around to give a league the benefit of the doubt. One fan online put it simply, "Can you stop letting people punch Caitlin?" Or, "What's the endgame here?" It's a blunt way of putting it, but it cuts to the core of what people are asking. What is the endgame? The WNBA spent the offseason creating a task force. They worked on officiating standards. They implemented education programs. They said they were pleased with early results. And then, in week 17 of the 2026 season, a player got punched in the throat during a nationally televised game, and nobody blew a whistle. And then, 2 days later, that same player got a technical foul for clapping. And the league looked at both of those situations and confirmed the technical stays. The suspension? That came after the internet got loud enough. The message that sends, intentional or not, is one the WNBA really can't afford to keep sending. Not in 2026. Not with everything that's riding on this league's ability to hold on to the attention it has finally, after 30 years, managed to earn. There's a moment in the aftermath of all of this that actually tells you a lot about where Caitlin Clark is in all of it. When she was asked about the technical foul, about the aggression, about all of the things happening around her, she didn't call anyone out beyond the referee in that specific situation. She didn't make sweeping accusations. She just said she was going to keep playing with emotion and passion, and if they're going to give her technicals for clapping, that's their choice. That's the kind of statement that sounds like someone who has been through enough cycles of this to know that getting too loud doesn't necessarily change anything. Someone who has figured out how to keep playing at the highest level even when the situation around her is chaotic and unfair. Someone who, as she said back in her rookie year, knows she's going to take some hard shots, and that's just what it is. There's something both admirable and genuinely sad about that. Admirable because she keeps performing at an extraordinary level through all of it. Sad because a player as talented as she is shouldn't have to factor in how many punches she's going to absorb before the referees do something about it. The Indiana Fever are still very much in the thick of the 2026 season. They've won some important games. Clark has been putting up historic numbers. The team around her has been developing. The Fever are a real contender this year, and that's going to continue to draw attention and viewers and money to the league. Which is exactly why this week was so important and so frustrating. The moment when everything went sideways was also a moment when the league had maximum eyes on it. Millions of people watching the Fever and the Mercury, drawn in by the storylines, by the competition, by Caitlin Clark's return to health and MVP-level performance. And what they saw was a fist to the throat with no whistle. The WNBA keeps talking about a new era. 30 years, new television deal, new expansion teams, new arenas, new stars. A new generation of fans. The language of transformation is everywhere when league officials speak about where things are headed. But transformation isn't just revenue and broadcast deals. Transformation is also making sure your biggest star can play without getting punched in the throat while the referees walk past. That's not a complicated ask. It's not a political ask. It's not a racial ask. It's just a basketball ask. Protect your players. Call the fouls. Apply the rules consistently. Do that, and everything else the WNBA is trying to build has a real foundation. Don't do that, and no amount of broadcast money or anniversary celebrations changes the fundamental problem. Caitlin Clark will recover from her back injury. She'll come back, and she'll keep breaking records. The fever will keep playing. The season will go on. But this week will stay in the conversation for a long time. Not just because of the punch, but because of everything around it. The technical for clapping. The suspension that came overnight instead of in the moment. The coach calling it absolutely unacceptable. The teammate saying the league and refs do nothing to protect her. The Phoenix coach implying the suspension was driven by social media. The analyst calling the league a rocket ship with a bad captain. All of it together adds up to a picture of a league that is both magnificent and messy. Both on the rise and at risk. Both transforming and struggling to keep up with the transformation. And at the center of all of it, Caitlin Clark. The magnifying glass. Not the cause of the problems, but the light that makes them impossible to ignore anymore. The referee who called Clark's technical for clapping, Gerda Gatling, has not publicly broken silence in a detailed way beyond what was communicated through the league's review process. The league confirmed the technical was assessed for clapping and instigating. Whether Gatling or any of the officials from the Thomas game will ever speak publicly and directly about what they saw and why they made the calls they made or didn't make remains to be seen. What we do know is that the league's head of referee development, Sue Bloch, has been speaking publicly about the standards. She said the officials never want to take passion out of the game, but overreactions to calls are in a different category. What she hasn't addressed directly is the pattern. The way that the league's worst and most dangerous plays involving Clark keep getting caught on video after the fact rather than called in the moment. Until that pattern breaks, the conversation won't stop. The frustration won't stop. The fans who came to the WNBA because of Caitlin Clark and are now watching this play out, they won't stop noticing. This is a league that has everything it needs to be something truly special. The talent is there. The story is there. The fan interest finally is there. What has to be there next is the credibility. The sense that the rules mean something. That every player, regardless of who they are, gets the same protection on that court. That a fist to the throat gets a whistle, not just a tweet. The WNBA got to its 30th birthday. That's genuinely something to be proud of. 30 years of women's professional basketball in a country that wasn't sure it wanted it, fighting to prove it was worth watching, building something real. Now, at 30, the question is, what kind of league is it going to be at 40? At 50? The answer to that question is being written right now, in real time, in every call and every no call, in every press conference and every podcast, in every viral video and every league statement. And right now, the story is still unfinished. Caitlin Clark will be back. The season will go on. More games will be played. More controversies will come, because that's the nature of this particular moment in WNBA history. Everything is amplified. Everything is watched. Everything matters. The question is whether the people running the league are watching it the same way the fans are, and whether they're willing to do more than react after the video goes viral. One punch to the throat that didn't get called told a whole story. The story of a league at a crossroads. The story of a star who keeps getting hit. The story of referees who keep missing the call. And now everyone is waiting to see what happens next.